Congratulations, you've made it through two parts of this three-part series. Or maybe you already knew the stuff from the other two parts, which is great. These are distinct sections. If you don't, maybe you should go back. In this third section, Jeff tells us how to make sure our future selves as an American will qualify for Social Security and Medicare. Your future self will thank you many times over if you follow his advice. This episode was recorded on December 12th, 2022. Let's get into it.
Jeff, I'm feeling very fortunate that as a young man, I had a job starting at the age of 10. And so when I get my Social Security printout of all my credits and things from the age of 10 until like 20, I always had a job. So I was able to get enough credits so that I will have Social Security when the day comes. But for a lot of international educators, Americans, that isn't the case. So there's that group that I just wonder, is there any way they can try to make up for lost time? And then I'm also wondering about that 25-year-old, again, American. She's starting overseas and she wants to try to contribute a little to Social Security so she can get some credits. Could you cover both those topics?
Yeah, great questions. Again, when I first came overseas, my wife and I, we were in our mid 20s, and Social Security was the furthest thing from our minds. We thought we would live forever. And then 40 happened, and then kids happened. And then you start to think a little differently about kind of the trajectory of life. The Social Security question, though, wasn't one that I really understood and appreciated until just a few years ago. So the way the Social Security system and the Medicare system in the United States is set up, it's predicated on your work history and employment. For the Medicare piece, it's predicated on earning what are considered quarter credits. And these quarter credits you earn each quarter. You can earn up to 4 a year. That's the maximum amount that you can earn. And they're based on a certain income amount. So for example, for 2023, quarter credit is worth approximately $1,640. So once a person has earned $6,560, at any point in that year, even though they're called quarter credits, once you've earned that amount of income, you've effectively met the minimum threshold for those 4 quarter credits for the year. And over the course of a person's working lifetime, you need to accrue 40 quarter credits. And once you've accrued the 40 quarter credits, you're eligible for the Medicare without having to pay into the system. Now, you can still have access to Medicare, but it requires you actually paying out of pocket for some of these different services that are associated with the Medicare. For some countries located throughout the world, they have what's called a tax equalization treaty with the United States. And effectively what that means is if you're paying taxes in their country, you simultaneously qualify for credits earned in the United States. So some of these countries include Austria, Belgium, Canada, Chile, Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, France, Norway, Japan, Ireland, Iceland, Slovenia, South Korea, Spain, the UK, Uruguay, etc. So if you're working in one of these countries and you're being taxed, part of your taxation in the equalization treaty will allow you to be able to earn quarter credits in the United States for your work in those countries. However, in many other places around the world, there aren't tax equalization treaties like Saudi Arabia, China, Singapore, places we've worked. So between my wife and I, each of us has roughly 22 credits of the 40 that we need. So similar to Audrey, I don't have my quarter credits because I've spent a career working abroad. And if you're a younger teacher that's, say 25 years of age, what can you do? If you're an older teacher and you're repatriating but not yet 65, what can you do? Let me talk about both bookends on there. For the younger teacher, you have an opportunity to declare what's called self-employment income. So let's say, for example, in addition to your earned income working at an international school, you can tutor. You can take on an online business. You present at a fair. You do some summer work in the United States. You have an opportunity to be involved in a summer program in another country. that money you can declare as self-employment income. You will have to pay taxes on it. And roughly speaking, for about $7,000 of self-employed income, you'll pay about $1,000 in tax. You can't avoid that. But the good news is, for that self-employed income, you will earn those 4 quarter credits for the year. So that's a really good way to earn those minimum quarter credits.
Sorry, what about writing a book?
If you write a book, that is considered earned income, but you can use that as self-employed earned income, and that could be declared, and then you could use that to help offset your taxes. That's part of the work that we're trying to do each year. The other good news, if you're married filing jointly, is that your spouse can qualify under you. So for example, if your spouse, Mark, in this case, Audrey, has the 40 quarter credits, you would qualify for Medicare under him. You would qualify for Social Security under him as a spouse as well. So there are some benefits associated with being married beyond just the great marriage.
So let's say I qualify under him. Does qualifying under your spouse look any different in terms of if you were to, have an appointment, have a surgery, etc.? Does it affect the amount that you can claim back, or is it exactly the same if it's your own Medicare
Yeah.
versus if you're on your spouse's Medicare? Is it different?
The spousal benefit, if you qualify under your spouse, is going to be less. But at the time of their death, if they died before you, you would get the step up to their current level.
Okay, be careful what you're implying there, Jeff.
I know, I'm just putting it out there. But the other side of this, so let's say, for example, you're 56 years old and you've repatriated and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I earn these credits? And you don't necessarily want to work a whole lot. Well, you could take on a part-time job, and that part-time earned income, as long as it's above about $7,000, you're going to get your quarter credits for that year. And let's say, for example, you want to be retired, but maybe only work seasonally. Well, you could work within a 3-month period and earn $7,000, and that would get you your quarter credits for that year. And then the next year, you could repeat that process again and then move yourself towards those 40 quarter credits. So there are ways in our early years of retirement before age 65 where we can acquire those credits to be able to be eligible.
Sorry, question.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm that kid in your class that just keeps asking all the questions.
Bring it on.
My understanding with the 40 quarters is that the amount that you earn, monthly will be based on the highest of those quarters or the top whatever percentage
right.
of those quarters. So if you're earning $7,000 a year, your Social Security income is going to be really small, even if you earn the 40 quarters, right?
That's correct. In fact, you can go to the Social Security website and you can look up your statement of your quarter credits. And on that site, you'll be able to see just how many credits you have earned and what your estimated amount would be at retirement. And for our family right now, our estimate amount is probably about $300 each.
Yikes. Okay.
Yeah. So
mine's probably less than that, but that's good to know.
It's not a lot.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, again, is because we made that trade-off in terms of not contributing to Social Security over these years, whether we were aware of it or not.
Yeah.
The reality is the Social Security Administration, the way the formulas are set up, is they use years of employment and your highest years of employment to determine, your eligibility as well as the amounts that you're going to be able to receive. And so for many expats, this is a revelation for them. They're not aware of that. They didn't understand the math that went into kind of how this whole thing works. So for those that are going to be on Social Security, and well over half of Americans, that's their primary source of income in retirement is Social Security payments. For those of us that are expats that don't have that, the question then becomes, what other levers can we pull on? What other resources do we have available to us? Certainly we can work, but our capacity to work is going to be diminished just because of age and physicality and maybe cognitive deficiencies. The other piece of that is earning power. That is, we don't have as much time to be able to generate that income, but cost of living can be lower as well. People may not have as many expenses.
Do we want to work is another thing I think we need to consider, right?
Yeah.
We're
Great.
retired. Wait a minute. What do you mean a whole nother, you hear about people having to work for 10 more years, even though they didn't intend to. They thought they were
That's right.
retiring. They go back to the States, they find out this information, and they're like, okay, got to get a job and work for 10 more years. So they substitute or they get a part-time job or what have you. And not fun if you didn't know that was going to happen, right? Rude awakening.
That's right. And that's part of that third stage of the crisis response work is like planning and preparing. Given what you've learned, given what you know now, what questions does this prompt? What plans can you start to make? And kind of like reverse engineering. We can make some assumptions, but there are no guarantees in life. Let's assume we're going to work until we're 58. Let's assume that's going to be internationally. Let's assume we want to live on $50,000 a year, adjusted for inflation and retirement. Working back from that, we can run some calculations to start to figure out, okay, how much do I need to be putting away on average to try to be able to be in a situation where I'll have that amount of money available to me in retirement. And for those people who don't know those sorts of things in terms of the questions even to ask or the calculations to undertake, that's where a good financial planner can be really valuable. That's where someone who has the heart of a teacher to be able to sit down with you and walk you through that and not make you feel intimidated and just help you to stay the course. I know stories. There are few stories, but I know stories of teachers who've done this for 25, 30 years that are retiring with $3, $4 million, $5 million. And it wasn't just a one-shot wonder on a slot machine. It was intentional, deliberate planning, staying the course 20, 30, 35 years, and they get to where they want to be with respect to, their financial picture. One of the things I often wonder is, you remember when we were back in the day, David and Audrey, we used to go to these job fairs and you would end up in this hotel and there'd be like 30 schools and it would be kind of exciting to figure out where am I going to be by the end of this weekend. I may be in South America or maybe in Russia or maybe in Europe. You just didn't know. It was all roll the dice.
So exciting.
I know, it was super exciting. Imagine if part of that process, though, they sat down, there was a table, there was a workshop where we helped international teachers, almost like, do you really want to do this? Do you really realize what you're signing up for?
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful adventure. Those of us who are listening to this that are tenured international teachers, these experiences have been fantastic. In one sense, you can't put a price tag on it.
Right.
But in another sense, we have to put a price tag on it.
Right.
And so the challenge is trying to figure out, okay, how can we do this in a way where we're having these wonderful, enriching life experiences and recognizing there's another 30 years of living to do.
Right.
As teachers, and we know this, learning is constant. Time is the variable, right? No matter what we're doing as we go through our life as educators, we're constantly in a state of learning. And there's a curiosity about being an educator. And so my hope, again, would be that folks would find others that they can ask questions to. And just like when I think back to this journey for me, it started even before I went to Jakarta. It started with Andrew Hallam, a guy who was winsome and loving and kind and was generous enough to share concepts and ideas with people to try to help educate them and help them address some of these things. And that was the catalyst that sparked additional conversations and additional. And so I hope people would want to take that on. I want to just do a quick pivot here and talk about that time between, say, 55 and 65 or 57 or 60 and 65. The time between the time you return to the States and qualify for Medicare. There's a lot that's changed in the US since we've been abroad with respect to the services that are available for medical coverage for US passport holders. And part of this is known as Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. And the Affordable Care Act is essentially a government system that's been set up since 2010 to provide a level of financial support to Americans to help offset the cost of their medical insurance. Now, the way this Affordable Care Act is set up is that it's based on the amount of earned income you report and unearned income that you report. So remember that brokerage account we were talking about, that account that has unearned income that's taxed differently?
Yep.
Well, for the Affordable Care Act, they still look at unearned income as part of the equation to determine how much credit you might receive to help offset the monthly cost of your taxes. So when we first started this conversation, and maybe this will be part of part one, we talked about these tax buckets. One of those tax buckets was a tax-free bucket or a Roth account. And then we talked about stepping up in basis and how you can reset the basis of your funds within your brokerage account so that when you sell them, you don't receive as much tax on them, even though you made a lot of gain. Well, the reason I'm talking about these is because with the ACA, the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, they're going to ask you what your reported income is. And if I have money in a Roth account, in the eyes of the IRS, that money counts as $0. So Peter Thiel, he's an investment hedge fund dude, and he's got $5 billion in his Roth account.
Wow.
$5 billion. In the eyes of the IRS, that's $0.
Man, oh man.
And so if you have money in that Roth account over the years and you needed to pull some of that out to supplement your earned income, in the eyes of the IRS, that $30,000 extra dollars you need out of your Roth account won't count against your subsidies for ACA premiums. In addition to that, if you've done the work of stepping up basis in your brokerage account over the years and you pull out, let's say, for example, you pull out $70,000, but 50 of that is your basis. This is what I put into it. In the eyes of the IRS, you've only made $20,000.
Right.
What that translates into is a lot of credit. So for example, I do the math on this, and you can go on to the ACA website and plug in your own numbers. There's really easy activity. Basically, what you do is you project out your age, your current age, how much income you think you're going to have, the state that you live in, and it'll tell you what your approximate monthly credits that you would receive from the government to help offset your medical premiums would be. So for our family of four, and by the way, you can be on the Affordable Care Act with dependents up to age 26. So for our family of four, if we repatriated to the US and went to North Dakota and we said our reported income was $50,000, we would qualify for $24,000 in health insurance premiums. What that would mean for us is our medical insurance would be roughly $200 to $300 a month.
Sweet. For the family of four.
For the family of four.
Right.
And so really good deals. And let's say, for example, we needed $80,000 to live on. Well, where are you getting the other $30,000? Well, we're getting it out of our Roth account. You can take out of your Roth account prior to age 59 all monies you've contributed to the account, but you cannot take out any of the unearned income till after age 59. So that's okay. We can run the buckets. So if you have different buckets of income, whether it's a never taxable account, maybe taxable account, always taxable account, you can pull different levers to try to strategically figure out your taxation situation. But every situation is unique and different. But the point that I wanted to make in being able to be afforded the opportunity to speak with you folks today was to raise awareness of this, to help teachers recognize, hey, I can start to ask questions and I don't need to feel afraid if I don't know this. And I can reach out through social media and try to find answers to these questions. And or you can, again, you can pay someone. I know folks who pay someone to consult with, and it's hourly basis or assets under management. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. If you have someone who charges you assets under management, let me just use you, Audrey and Mark. You guys have a hypothetical here. You got $3 million you've saved away for retirement.
Absolutely. 5, actually, yeah.
Okay, 5 million.
Yeah.
Okay, 5 million, no problem.
Yeah.
For a small fee, 1%, a yearly 1% fee, I'll consult with you. I'll give you advice. We'll have 4 or 5 sessions a year. Well, we'll take an hour and a half to go over your fee structures and try to help you understand a little bit more about your investment strategy. It's just 1%. That sounds reasonable, doesn't it?
Over $5 million.
No,
How do you feel about paying me $50,000 a year?
we don't have Mark here to do the math.
It's just 1%. You see, this is what I'm talking about when people use language like 1% or 0.5%.
Yeah.
When we don't realize the full number scheme, it's a big difference versus a guy like Mark Zorrell, who is online and offers services to expats for fee only.
Yeah.
You know, my fee is $100. $100,
Yeah.
$100 an hour.
Yeah.
Sit down, we'll talk about it, we'll go, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have some trade-offs that we can make in terms of asking questions and learning this, or we can choose to pay someone. That's okay too. There's no shame in that. I just want people to understand the cost.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Andrew talked about Mark Zorrell and his service that he offers.
Right. So there's lots of good folks out there, lots of good things to think about in terms of these taxation pieces. If I could just leave your listening audience with a few closing thoughts, it would be, don't be intimidated to ask questions. Feel free to reach out to colleagues and ask them about, there's kind of a taboo around finances, but I'm trying to help demystify that a little bit by helping folks pick up the language, as David talked about a little bit earlier, to have that conversation with their CPA. I still work with our CPA. I run all the things that we're doing through him. And it's just, there's an assurance in knowing that, what I'm learning and what we're doing is all on board, and be intentional, aim at something, be deliberate about what it is that you want to do. If you say you want to have X amount of dollars for retirement, well, reverse engineer that. Ask yourself what you're doing to move yourself in that direction, and then don't follow the herd. If you follow the herd, you'll go over the cliff.
Fair point. And I will say that, here I am being a little ignorant and everything, but Mark might know some of this stuff and he may already have done some of these things. I'm not even sure of that. So that's a little plug I will make, is don't necessarily rely on your spouse to be the one that knows it. Ask the questions and make sure you also understand it. So that's my little full disclosure from my side.
And Audrey, just know you've got a couple counselors here that if you and Mark need some help in discussing these things, we can help you.
A
And
shoulder to cry on.
yeah,
For a small non-negotiable
well,
fee.
I'm going for the
1%.
percentage. Yeah, I'm going for the percentage. That's where I'm going.
That's it.
All right, Jeff, I see, like you were saying earlier, yourself pivoting into the next part of your career when that time comes, and staying an educator, but you're going to educate about financial awareness. And I think that's going to be just wonderful. Your personal growth, and you're going to help a lot of people. But at the present time, do you have like a social networking presence or a way that people could follow you? Or is there a way for people to connect with you?
The main way that folks can get in touch with me if they're interested, and by the way, I love these questions. Here's the caveat. Whatever question you ask of me, you give me an opportunity to learn, as long as you recognize I'm learning with you.
Uh-huh.
And my main mode of learning, if you ask my wife, is error.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah.
But I learn.
Yeah.
And the process of learning sometimes is a little bit painful. But if folks want to get in touch with me, they can shoot me an email at longlakend@gmail.com. longlakend, the ND is North Dakota, @gmail.com. You can also...
Facebook?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook as well. If folks want to get in touch with me through Facebook, you can certainly do that. Look me up. And I'd be happy to try to help answer questions that folks have along the way. And I'm really enjoying the journey. The other thing that I'll say is there's a colleague of mine, her name is Lee Martin, and she's formed a group called Connections International. And she's set up some webinars. And I may at some point start taking these on myself, where I've hosted working with international teachers covering these same principles in 6 1.5-hour sessions for, I don't know, it was $150, $200 for a teacher to attend these 3 sessions where we cover these 6 concepts around finance. And I talk a lot about some of this stuff in depth. So that may be something we put out there again for fellow teachers. Like many of you that are listening to this, I've got to earn these credits as well. I have to think of ways to acquire these quarter credits, and maybe we'll start that up again to host those sessions with international teachers online to equip them with this information.
Awesome.
So thanks for asking for that.
Awesome. I think that would be really a great service to provide.
I've enjoyed it. This is such a wonderful field to be in, between David and Audrey and myself, folks that are listening, we probably have about 100 years of international experience between the 3 of us, right?
There you go.
And it's wonderful. What I don't want is for people to fear coming overseas. I want them to have a plan, though.
Yeah.
I want them to be able to really think strategically about the cost benefit of what they're choosing to do. And, if the math works out for you, dive into it. The last thing I'll say, and David, you're already doing this. You're doing a financial speak, what we call geo-arbitrage. Have you ever heard this term before?
That's a new one to me.
Yeah, so geo-arbitrage is a term that's used to describe expats who move abroad to save financially.
Uh-huh.
They recognize that the cost of living is markedly lower. The quality of life is sometimes much higher. The pace of life is a little bit slower. And they're not afraid. These expats who repatriate for a portion of the year and then move to another post or another place, whether it's Portugal, Panama, South America, Mexico, for example. They're not afraid of that. And this concept of geo arbitrage is another great way to potentially save thousands of dollars a year in living expenses.
I like it, while enjoying perhaps a more moderate climate.
Right.
Right.
It's the reason I tell our audience I haven't been speaking a lot. I'm here at my wonderful little Airbnb in southern Mexico near the beach, and all these crows come in every night. And so it's just too much noise. But you are exactly right, Jeff. That is what I'm doing. I'm traveling the world, and it's a great way to save money and to be a global nomad, which I am. So you are spot on. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I love it. You're welcome. And, we're not afraid. We're not afraid of what, comes out in the media. And, just a fun side story. I remember when we first arrived in Beijing, China. This was back in 1995. It was still the old Beijing airport. We arrived in the middle of the night, and the old communist green paint was peeling off the ceiling still, the red stars. There was a stench in the air.
What
You could
have we
hardly
done?
see. There were burned barrels outside on the highway. And we're driving into town with our cat in 30 boxes.
Nice.
That's what we were told to bring. Just bring it all on
Yeah.
the plane. And so we arrive at the Lidu Fondien, Lidu Hotel, which is where the school is located on the back of the hotel there. And I thought to myself, as a young married guy, what have I gotten us into here? It was the best international school I've had the privilege of serving in my 26 years of working. It was such a wonderful, enriching, powerful experience. And so I just want to encourage people to take it by the reins, get after it, and enjoy this international experience, because it's wonderful. Absolutely.
I'm so glad you said that, because one of David and I have kind of a motto, which is eyes wide open. We really want people to be able to go into this armed with the knowledge, if we could say,
yes,
to know that yes, there are going to be challenges, but it's so worth it. And so I love that you ended on that note. Thank you again so much for taking the time. It's been such a pleasure and a learning roller coaster for me. So that's awesome. And, we hope to have you back on another time for sure, to maybe take some other deep dives into, as you talked about, the parenting. I know you've got your book.
Yes.
And you also perhaps can talk about some other pieces of the international schooling experience. So thanks again, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Audrey and David. I'd love to. I feel like this is an arena that I maybe feel comfortable about 15% talking about, but my real expertise is kids and families as a psychologist. So I'm looking forward to being able to share in future podcasts. So thank you for that.
Thank you for joining us today on Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
and David,
inviting you to travel,
teach,
and connect with us.